Your neighbors, the people who live right next door, separated from you by just a wall, a fence, a few feet of space. You see them every day. Wave hello. Make small talk about the weather. You think you know them, but you don't. Not really, because behind closed doors, behind friendly smiles and casual conversations, some neighbors are hiding something. Something dark, something dangerous, something that's been watching you much closer than you realize. Tonight, I have 3 true horror stories about neighbors who weren't what they seemed. Stories about people who discovered that the greatest threat to their safety wasn't miles away. It was living right next door, watching, waiting, planning, because when danger lives next door, there's nowhere to hide. They know your schedule. They know when you're home and when you're not. They know your vulnerabilities, and they have constant access. This is Last Night FM, and tonight we're talking about the people who live a little too close. Rachel Thompson was excited when she signed the lease on her new apartment in downtown Portland in March 2019. It was perfect, affordable, good location, close to her work. The building was older but well-maintained. Her neighbors seemed quiet and respectful. After a string of bad roommate situations, Rachel was thrilled to finally have her own place. Her next-door neighbor was a man named Tom. He was in his late 30s, worked from home doing something with computers. He was polite but reserved. They'd occasionally pass each other in the hallway. He'd nod hello. She'd smile back. Normal neighbor interactions. Nothing that raised any red flags. Rachel settled into her new apartment quickly. She decorated. She established routines. She felt safe and comfortable. This was her sanctuary, her private space where she could relax and be herself without judgment or intrusion. But about 2 months after moving in, Rachel started noticing small things. Strange things. Things that didn't quite make sense but weren't alarming enough to really worry about. Her underwear drawer seemed slightly different when she came home from work. Not ransacked, just barely disturbed. Like someone had looked through it carefully and tried to put everything back exactly as it was but hadn't quite succeeded. Rachel told herself she was being paranoid. Maybe she just didn't remember how she'd left things. Maybe she was more disorganized than she thought. It was nothing. Then she started noticing other things. Her bathroom products seemed to be in slightly different positions. A book on her nightstand wasn't quite where she'd left it. The angle of her bedroom lamp had changed. Small things, subtle things, things she couldn't be completely certain about because who remembers exactly where they put every object? Rachel mentioned it to her boyfriend, Mike, one evening when he came over for dinner. "I think I'm going crazy," she said with a nervous laugh. "I keep thinking someone's been in my apartment when I'm not here." Mike looked concerned. "Have you checked your locks? Any signs of forced entry?" "No, nothing like that. It's just little things. Like someone's been looking through my stuff but being really careful not to leave obvious signs." "Maybe you should get a camera," Mike suggested. "One of those nanny cams. Put it somewhere hidden. If someone is coming in, you'll catch them." Rachel considered it but felt silly. Who would be coming into her apartment? The landlord? But they'd give notice. Another tenant? Why would they risk it? It didn't make sense. She decided she was just being paranoid and tried to put it out of her mind. But then came the sound. One night in early May, around 2 a.m., Rachel woke to a faint clicking noise. It was rhythmic. Click, pause, click, pause. She lay in bed, listening, trying to identify it. It seemed to be coming from the wall behind her headboard, the wall she shared with Tom's apartment. Rachel got up and put her ear against the wall. The clicking was definitely there, soft but distinct. It would click, pause for a few seconds, then click again, like a camera shutter, like someone taking photos. But that was ridiculous. Why would there be a camera in her wall? Rachel went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The clicking continued intermittently throughout the night. The next morning, Rachel examined the wall behind her bed carefully. First, she saw nothing unusual, just paint and drywall. But as she ran her hand along the surface, searching, her finger found something. Tiny hole, so small she'd never noticed it before, perfectly round, about the size of a pencil tip, positioned at exactly eye level if you were lying in bed. Rachel's heart started pounding. She grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it into the hole. She couldn't see anything, just darkness. But the hole was too perfect, too precisely placed. This wasn't a nail hole or natural damage. This had been drilled, deliberately. She called Mike immediately. He came over within 30 minutes. Together, they examined the hole more carefully. Mike took out his phone and used the camera to try to see inside the hole. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Rachel, there's something in there. It looks like a lens." Rachel felt sick. "A lens? Like a camera lens?" "I think so. Call the police. Right now." Police arrived within an hour. They took the report seriously. 2 officers examined the hole, confirmed it appeared to be a camera, and asked permission to speak with the neighbor in the adjacent apartment. Rachel agreed immediately. They knocked on Tom's door. He answered casually, seeming surprised to see police. He was cooperative, even friendly. When officers explained they were investigating a possible camera in the shared wall, Tom's expression barely changed. He claimed to know nothing about it, said they were welcome to look around if they wanted. Officers searched Tom's apartment. In his bedroom, they found the camera setup. A small wireless camera, professionally installed, with the lens feeding through the wall into Rachel's bedroom. The camera was positioned to capture her bed. Everything that happened in that bed. The footage was being recorded to Tom's computer. When police searched Tom's computer, they found hundreds of hours of video. Rachel sleeping, Rachel getting dressed, Rachel in intimate moments with her boyfriend. Every private moment in her bedroom for the past 2 months had been recorded and watched. Tom was arrested immediately, but as police investigated further, they discovered something even more disturbing. This wasn't Tom's first time. They found evidence that Tom had lived in 3 other apartments over the past 5 years. In each apartment, he'd lived next to a single woman. In each apartment, police found similar holes drilled in shared walls. Tom had been systematically stalking and surveilling women through walls for years. Rachel was devastated. She'd been violated in the most intimate way possible. Her safe space, her sanctuary, had been compromised. Someone had been watching her every night, studying her, recording her, and she'd had no idea. The psychological impact was profound. Rachel couldn't sleep in that apartment anymore. She broke her lease and moved out within a week. She had nightmares about being watched, developed anxiety about undressing in her own home, started checking walls in every room she entered, looking for tiny holes. Tom was charged with multiple counts of voyeurism and stalking. During the trial, more victims came forward. Women from his previous apartments. Women who'd never known they were being watched until police contacted them. Women who'd noticed small things but dismissed them as paranoia. Women who'd felt vaguely uncomfortable in their homes but couldn't explain why. Tom showed no remorse. In court testimony, he claimed he was just curious about his neighbors. Said he found it fascinating to watch people when they thought they were alone. He didn't seem to understand that what he'd done was a profound violation. To him, drilling through a wall and installing a camera was just a hobby. Rachel attended every day of the trial. She wanted to look Tom in the eye, wanted him to know the damage he'd caused. When he was finally sentenced to 6 years in prison, she felt some measure of relief. but the violation never really left her. She still checks walls, still feels uncomfortable in her own bedroom sometimes, still wonders if there are other Toms out there, drilling tiny holes, installing hidden cameras, watching women through walls. Because if Tom did it in 4 different apartments to 4 different women without getting caught for years, how many others are doing the same thing right now? Rachel's story became a warning, a reminder that privacy can be violated in ways we never imagine, that the person living right next door might be closer than we think, that walls aren't always the protection we assume they are, and sometimes the feeling that you're being watched isn't paranoia. Sometimes it's instinct, and you should always trust your instincts. The Chen family moved to suburban Westerville, Ohio in the summer of 2018. David and Lisa Chen had an 8-year-old daughter named Lily. They'd bought a nice house in a quiet neighborhood, good schools, safe streets, perfect for raising a child. Their next-door neighbors, Kevin and Sandra Morrison, introduced themselves the day the Chens moved in. They were in their early 40s, no children of their own, friendly and welcoming. Sandra brought over fresh-baked cookies. Kevin offered to help David unload the moving truck. They seemed like the ideal neighbors. Over the following months, the Morrisons and the Chens developed a friendly relationship. They'd chat over the fence, have occasional barbecues together, exchange pleasantries about weather and local events. Sandra especially seemed to take an interest in Lily. She'd compliment her clothes, ask about school, engage her in conversation. Lisa thought it was sweet. Sandra probably missed having children of her own. The Morrisons offered to watch the Chen's house when they traveled. They had a spare key for emergencies. When David and Lisa mentioned needing a babysitter occasionally, Sandra immediately volunteered. She'd be happy to watch Lily anytime, free of charge. They were neighbors. That's what neighbors did for each other. Lisa was initially hesitant about having neighbors babysit, but Sandra was so insistent, so genuinely enthusiastic about spending time with Lily, that Lisa eventually agreed. Just for an hour or two occasionally when Lisa had appointments and David was working late. Lily seemed to enjoy going to the Morrisons' house. She'd come home talking about the games they'd play, the snacks Sandra would make, the attention they'd give her. Sandra and Kevin seemed to dote on Lily. They'd ask detailed questions about her day, her friends, her interests. They remembered everything she told them. Lisa thought it was nice that Lily had adults in her life who cared about her. But something nagged at her. Something she couldn't quite identify. The Morrisons' interest in Lily seemed intense. Not inappropriate exactly, just more focused than normal neighborly affection. Lisa mentioned it to David once, but he dismissed her concerns. "They're just lonely," he said. "They don't have kids. They probably enjoy having a child to care for." In November 2018, Lisa and David had a wedding to attend out of town. They asked Sandra to watch Lily for the afternoon. Sandra was delighted. Lily went next door around 2 p.m. Lisa and David left for the wedding, planning to pick her up around 8 p.m. When they returned that evening and picked up Lily, she seemed quiet, subdued, not her usual chatty self. Lisa asked if everything was okay. Lily said yes, but something in her tone was off. Later that night, as Lisa tucked Lily into bed, Lily spoke quietly. "Mom, can I tell you something weird?" "Of course, sweetheart. What is it?" "When I was at the Morrisons' house today, I got lost looking for the bathroom. I opened the wrong door by accident." Lily paused. There was a room I'd never seen before, a room they never showed me. Lisa felt a prickle of unease. "What kind of room?" "It had pictures all over the walls. Pictures of me. Lots and lots of pictures." Lisa's blood went cold. "Pictures of you? What do you mean?" "Photos. Like, from outside. Some were from our backyard. Some looked like they were taken through my bedroom window. There were pictures of me at school, at the park, everywhere. The whole room was just pictures of me. Lisa's hands started shaking. She tried to stay calm for Lily's sake. Did Sandra or Kevin see you go into that room? Sandra came in right after me. She seemed really upset that I'd seen it. She said it was a surprise they were working on for me, like a scrapbook room. But Mom, it felt wrong. Why would they have pictures of me through my window? Lisa immediately went downstairs and told David. Within minutes, they called the police. Officers arrived and took their statement seriously. With the Chens' permission, police obtained a search warrant for the Morrison residence. What they found was beyond anything the Chens had imagined. The room Lily had described was real. An entire bedroom converted into what could only be described as a shrine to Lily Chen. Photos covered every inch of the walls. Hundreds of them. Lily playing in her backyard. Lily walking to school. Lily in her bedroom visible through her window. Lily at the grocery store with her mother. Lily at birthday parties. Every aspect of Lily's life had been documented and displayed. But the photos were just the beginning. Police found journals. Detailed journals documenting Lily's daily routines. What time she left for school. What she wore. What she ate. Who her friends were. Everything Kevin and Sandra had learned from their conversations with Lily and from their surveillance. And then police found the plans. Printed documents outlining how to homeschool a child. How to obtain false identification. How to travel internationally with a child who isn't yours. The Morrisons had been planning something. Planning to take Lily. Kevin and Sandra were arrested immediately. As police investigated their background, a horrifying pattern emerged. The Morrisons had lived in 3 other neighborhoods over the past 12 years. In each neighborhood, they'd befriended a family with a young daughter. In each case, they'd developed an obsession with that child. In each case, the family had eventually reported concerning behavior and the Morrisons had moved away. But in those 3 previous cases, something worse had happened. In each of those neighborhoods, the child they'd been obsessed with had eventually disappeared. 3 unsolved missing children cases across 3 states. All girls between ages 7 and 10. All vanished without a trace within months of the Morrisons moving away. Police couldn't definitively prove the Morrisons had taken those children. The evidence was circumstantial, but the pattern was undeniable. And investigators believed the Chen family had interrupted the Morrisons' plan before it reached its conclusion. Lily would have been the 4th. The Morrisons showed no remorse. In police interrogations, Sandra claimed they just loved children and wanted to give a deserving child a better life. Kevin remained mostly silent but smiled throughout the questioning. A cold, empty smile that made investigators deeply uncomfortable. The Chens were traumatized. The people they'd trusted with their daughter, the people they'd invited into their lives, had been planning to abduct her, had been documenting her life in preparation, had been grooming both Lily and her parents for months. Lily had nightmares for years. She was terrified of making new friends, of trusting adults, of being photographed. The family moved to a different state, changed their last name, started over completely, because they knew that somewhere those 3 other missing girls might still be out there. Might have been with the Morrisons all along. Might have been hidden somewhere the police never found. The Morrisons were convicted on multiple charges including stalking, attempted kidnapping, and conspiracy. They received 25 years each. But the families of those 3 missing girls still have no answers. No closure. No bodies to bury. And the Chens live with the knowledge that if Lily hadn't accidentally opened that wrong door, if she hadn't told her parents what she'd seen, their daughter would be gone. Another missing child. Another unsolved case. Another family destroyed by the friendly neighbors who seemed so perfect. James Park was excited to move to Seattle for graduate school in November 2020. He'd found a cheap apartment in a building near campus. It wasn't fancy, but it was affordable and functional. Perfect for a broke graduate student. The building was old, with thin walls and creaky floors, but James didn't mind. He was used to less than perfect accommodations. His apartment was on the 3rd floor. Above him, in apartment 4C, lived a man James rarely saw. Maybe once or twice in passing in the hallway or lobby. The man was in his 30s, average build, unremarkable appearance. He'd nod if they made eye contact but never spoke. James didn't even know his name. They were the kind of neighbors who shared a building but not a life. Perfectly normal urban living. For the first few weeks, James heard nothing from apartment 4C. His upstairs neighbor seemed quiet, respectful. No loud music or television. No parties. No heavy footsteps. It was ideal. James could focus on his studies without distraction. But in early December, James started hearing sounds at night. It would start around 11 p.m. or midnight. A rhythmic thumping sound. Not loud, but distinct. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded like furniture being moved or something heavy being dragged across the floor. James tried to ignore it. Old buildings had weird acoustics. Sound traveled strangely through old walls and floors. Maybe the upstairs neighbor was rearranging furniture. Maybe he worked out late at night. Maybe he had insomnia and was restless. James put in earplugs and tried to sleep. But the sounds continued, night after night, always between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The thumping would go on for 30 minutes or an hour, then stop. Sometimes James would also hear what sounded like dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. It was annoying but not alarming, just weird. Then, in mid-December, James heard something different. Between the thumping sounds, he heard what might have been crying. Muffled, distant, but distinctly human. A woman's voice, sobbing, then silence, then more thumping. James sat up in bed, suddenly alert. Had he really heard crying? Or was his tired brain interpreting the sounds incorrectly? He listened carefully. The thumping continued. Then, faintly, he heard it again. A muffled cry, like someone was crying but their voice was being suppressed. Like a hand over a mouth. James felt uneasy. He got up and put his ear against the ceiling. The sounds were definitely coming from directly above him. From apartment 4C. The thumping, the dragging, and yes, muffled crying. Someone was crying up there. But maybe it was a movie or television. Maybe his upstairs neighbor was watching something late at night. James tried to convince himself that was the explanation. But it didn't sound like television. It sounded real, raw, desperate. The next morning, James hesitated. Should he report this? Report what exactly? Strange sounds? Possible crying? He'd sound paranoid. Like he was imagining things. And what if his neighbor was just watching horror movies or having a bad night? James would look foolish. He decided to wait, to listen more carefully, to be sure before making accusations. The sounds continued every night for the next week. Always the same pattern. Thumping, dragging, occasional muffled crying. Sometimes James would hear what sounded like a voice. A male voice, speaking harshly but too muffled to make out words. Then a female voice responding, pleading, then silence. James became increasingly disturbed. This didn't sound like movies or television anymore. This sounded like something was happening up there, something bad. But he still wasn't sure enough to call police. What if he was wrong? What if it was just a couple having arguments? What if he got his neighbor in trouble over nothing? On December 28th, James finally decided to act. He'd knock on the upstairs neighbor's door, politely ask about the noise, mention he'd heard what sounded like someone crying, see how the neighbor responded. If everything was innocent, fine. If not, James would call police. James climbed the stairs to the 4th floor, found apartment 4C, knocked on the door. His heart was pounding. He felt ridiculous and terrified at the same time. The door opened after about 30 seconds. The man from 4C stood there, looking perfectly normal, slightly annoyed at being disturbed but not hostile. "Yes. Hey, sorry to bother you," James said, trying to sound casual. "I live in 3C, right below you. I've been hearing some sounds late at night. Thumping, dragging, sometimes what sounds like crying. I just wanted to check if everything's okay up here." The man's expression didn't change. "I live alone. I don't make noise. You must be hearing sounds from a different apartment. Sound travels weird in this building." "Yeah, but it definitely sounds like it's coming from directly." "I'm telling you, it's not from my apartment," the man interrupted. His tone was firmer now, not threatening but final. "I work early mornings. I'm in bed by 9 p.m. every night. Whatever you're hearing isn't coming from here." James felt confused. He knew the sounds were from 4C. He'd put his ear to the ceiling and confirmed it. But the man seemed so certain, so calm. Maybe James really was hearing things wrong. "Okay, sorry to bother you," James said. The man closed the door without another word. James went back downstairs, but something felt wrong. The man's reaction had been too controlled, too rehearsed, like he'd been prepared for that exact question and had his answer ready. That night, James heard the sounds again. The thumping, the dragging, and this time he was absolutely certain. The sounds were from 4C. The man had lied. James called the police, explained the situation, described the sounds, mentioned the upstairs neighbor's denial. The dispatcher said they'd send someone to do a welfare check. 2 officers arrived the next morning. James met them in the lobby and explained everything again. The officers went up to 4C and knocked. The man answered, again perfectly calm. Officers asked to come inside to check on things. The man hesitated, then agreed. What happened next was chaos. Within minutes, more police arrived. An ambulance, detective units. The building was evacuated. James watched from outside as officers brought someone out on a stretcher. A woman, thin, bruised, barely conscious. Police told residents they could return in a few hours. James learned the details later from news reports and police statements. The man in 4C, whose name was Robert Chun, had kidnapped a woman named Amy Martinez 6 weeks earlier, grabbed her off the street as she walked home from work, brought her to his apartment, kept her prisoner in a closet. The sounds James had been hearing were real. Amy trying to escape, Robert dragging her back, Amy crying, Robert beating her into submission. For 6 weeks, she'd been in that apartment, directly above James's head, screaming for help that James almost didn't give. Amy survived. Barely. She was hospitalized for 2 weeks, suffered from severe malnutrition, dehydration, and injuries from repeated physical abuse. Police said if James hadn't called when he did, Amy would have died within days. Robert was arrested and charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, assault, and attempted murder. During the investigation, police discovered Robert had been planning this for months, had stalked multiple women before choosing Amy, had prepared his apartment specifically to hold someone prisoner. The closet had been reinforced, soundproofed as much as possible in an old building. He'd stockpiled supplies, created a prison in his apartment. James was hailed as a hero, but he felt guilty. He'd heard sounds for weeks before calling police. He'd hesitated. He'd almost convinced himself he was imagining things. If he'd called sooner, Amy would have suffered less. The building never felt the same after that. James moved out at the end of the semester. Many other tenants did too. Nobody wanted to live in a building where someone had been held captive for 6 weeks while people lived their normal lives just feet away. James learned a terrible lesson. That evil can be happening right above your head. That someone can be screaming for help so close you can hear it, and you might convince yourself it's nothing. That the instinct to not get involved, to not make a fuss, to not seem paranoid, can cost someone their life. He also learned that apartments aren't as separate as we think. That the person living one floor up has access to you that you never consider. That your neighbor's choices, your neighbor's secrets, your neighbor's crimes can become your trauma. And that sometimes the worst thing you can do is nothing. 3 neighbors. 3 nightmares hiding in plain sight. A man who watched through walls for years. A couple who collected photos of a child they planned to take. And a kidnapper whose victim was trapped 1 floor up while life continued below. Your neighbors are closer than you think. They know more than you realize. And some of them are hiding horrors you'd never imagine. Trust your instincts. Investigate strange things. And remember, the greatest danger might be living right next door. This has been Last Night FM.